Blue and red lights ricocheted off my cedar fence, while a woman in a lemon cardigan shrieked into the night air. "Officer, he's harboring an unapproved pergola," she declared, pointing at my backyard like she discovered a crime scene. A police officer leaned into his dash cam with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Meanwhile, my sprinklers, still set on a high arc from last week's heat wave, suddenly hissed to life and baptized the entire scene like some budget theme park water show. The woman pointed at my yard, at the sky, at what I can only describe as the concept of free will itself. I waved calmly from my lawn chair, holding a folder that said in large block letters, "Not in your HOA. My name is Graham O'Neill. I'm a software engineer, weekend woodworker, and professional mind kind of guy. I bought my place at the far end of Blackberry Hollow, a sleepy cul-de-sac that butts up against Mapler Crest Estates. Now, Mapler Crest is a labyrinth of mailbox clusters and bylaws enforced by one Shauna Consincte, HOA president, cardigan enthusiast, and human smoke alarm. Here's the thing, though. My parcel was carved from old farmland and recorded on a completely separate plat in the county records. Translation: my land is Switzerland in this suburban war zone. Mapler Crest Estates is decidedly not Switzerland. The realtor mentioned it 3 times during the walkthrough, and I even had a surveyor confirm it before closing. My deed explicitly states I'm outside their jurisdiction. I thought that was the end of it. Spoiler alert: Shauna and Kay does not accept reality when it conflicts with her vision of order. It all began innocently enough with a note on my front door written in aggressive red gel pen. Unapproved mailbox colors threaten neighborhood congruity. It read, literally the same black as every single mailbox they approve in Mapler Crest. The next day, another note appeared. Trash cans visible for 11 minutes past curfew. I don't have their curfew. I have gravity and Tuesday morning pickup. Then the surveillance started. I'd catch Shauna lurking behind ornamental grasses with binoculars, studying my property like a detective on a stakeout. She placed a measuring tape across my driveway once, examining it like she was sizing up a casket. She even photographed my dog Hobbs for what she called a breed compliance audit. Hobbs is a golden retriever. The most threatening thing about him is his ability to beg for treats. Then came the fines. Official-looking documents on paper emblazed with a Maple Crest logo, complete with payment deadlines and late fee warnings. $25 for improper holiday decoration placement in March. I hadn't put up any decorations. $54 lawn height exceeding community standards by 7 inches. My lawn was professionally cut 2 days prior. $100 for unauthorized vehicle parking. That was my own car in my own driveway. I mailed every single one back with a sticky note that said, "Wrong jurisdiction. Do not pass go." I also included copies of my property deed. Shauna ignored them completely. That's when Shauna truly escalated. She had my visiting brother's Honda courtesy towed from my own driveway while he was inside having dinner with me. I had to pay $300 to retrieve it from an impound lot 20 meters away. She rearranged my potted tomatoes onto her property for what she called evaluation purposes. When I went to retrieve them, she threatened to call the police for trespassing. She sent a neighborhood-wide email alleging I was running a pergola speakeasy, whatever that means. People started slowing their Sioux verses as they drove by, sipping their cold brews like they'd paid for balcony seats to some suburban theater production. One neighbor actually asked me if I sold moonshine. "I don't even drink." The line finally snapped when I installed a small, tasteful cedar pergola over my back patio. There are no neighbors behind me, just a cornfield and one cranky hawk that likes to judge me from the fence post. I pulled all the proper city permits, had the design approved by the actual municipal building department, and hired a licensed contractor. Everything was completely legal and above board. I was admiring my handiwork one Saturday afternoon when Shauna Spooked marched over with a clipboard and 2 board members who looked like board groomsmen at a wedding they didn't want to attend. She slapped a bright orange stopwork sticker on one of my posts and announced with the authority of a dictator, "As president of Maple Crest Estates, I am ordering immediate demolition of this structure." I looked at her calmly and replied, "As a sovereign citizen of not your subdivision, I respectfully decline." Her face turned the color of a fire engine. She sputtered something about architectural review committees and community covenants. I reminded her very slowly and clearly that I was not part of her community. I showed her my property survey again. She crumpled it into a ball and threw it into my flower bed. One of the board members whispered, "Shauna, maybe we should check the legal / She silenced him with a glare that could melt steel. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right there in my backyard. "I need to report construction without permits and threats to community harmony," she told the dispatcher with urgency, usually reserved for actual emergencies. The dispatcher asked if anyone was in danger. Shauna responded, "The entire neighborhood's property values are in danger." I sat back down in my lawn chair and waited. This was going to be entertaining. 2 officers arrived about 15 minutes later. They took in the scene with the weary professionalism of people who've seen too much suburban drama. They looked at Shauna's sticker on my post, my folder of documents, and the board hawk still watching from its perch. One officer asked to see property lines. I handed over county plats, tax identification documents, my deed, the original survey from when I purchased the property, and an email from the city planner explicitly affirming my lot's independence from Maple Crest Estates. I even had the building permit for my pergola stamped and approved by the city. Shauna, not to be outdone, produced a dog-eared HOA handbook from her enormous purse and declared it was as legally binding as the Constitution itself. The officer actually winced. The hawk might have laughed. The other officer asked Shauna if she had any documentation proving my property was part of Maple Crest. She said the boundaries were obvious and gestured vaguely at the air. That's when things got interesting. Turns out calling the police invited actual adults into this suburban sandbox. The sergeant radioed the city, who then looped in the county recorder's office and code enforcement. They arrived like the world's most bland Justice League, armed with tablets and cross-referenced parcel numbers. After about 20 minutes of consultation, checking digital maps, and pulling up historical records on their devices, they concluded with a collective bureaucratic sigh that my land was not, had never been, and could not possibly be under the Maple Crest Estates' HOA jurisdiction. The county recorder even pulled up the original platting documents from 1978, showing my parcel was always separate. Shauna's face went white, then red, then an alarming shade of purple. Then code enforcement asked Shauna some pointed questions about that courtesy tow for my driveway and the stop work sticker she'd affixed to my lumber. That they explained counts as tampering with personal property. The county recorder, bless her heart, explained in very clear terms that issuing fake fines and using an association's official letter head-on non-members could potentially constitute fraud. She also mentioned something about false impersonation of authority. The two board members who'd come with Shauna began scooting backward like crabs wearing boat shoes, trying to distance themselves from the situation. One of them actually said, "We just thought the paperwork was handled." But Shauna doubled down with a wild look in her eyes. "It's the spirit of Maple Crest," she insisted, as if that meant she could annex my property through sheer vibes and willpower alone. "We maintain standards here. We have rules. Everyone follows them." The sergeant pointed out that I wasn't part of everyone. Shauna ignored him and continued ranting about property values and community integrity until the officers had clearly had enough. Then came the karmic thunder. The officers followed up on my formal complaint about the towed vehicle. The tow company produced paperwork signed by Shauna Conson-Codd, property agent, falsely claiming authority over my address. The document even had a fake work order number and listed my address as being within Maple Crest boundaries. That the sergeant explained in a tone that suggested this was not going to end well for her is a serious problem that comes with handcuffs. In front of a growing semicircle of neighbors who were absolutely filming this on their phones, despite pretending not to. Shauna was politely but firmly escorted toward a police cruiser for what the officer called a long conversation downtown. She protested loudly, insisting this was all a misunderstanding and that she was just doing her job as president. As she was being read her options, my sprinklers, still on that same timer from earlier, I swear, suddenly erupted again and misted the entire scene with water. Shauna's lemon cardigan turned the soggy color of boiled asparagus. Her carefully styled hair wilted into wet strings. Her face went through about 17 different shades of red and purple as the reality of her situation sank in. She shouted something about neighborhood standards and property values. One neighbor dropped her phone. Another gasped audibly. The watching neighbors finally lowered their phones, looking stunned. The two board members were already speed-walking back toward their own houses, clearly wanting no part of what was coming next. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from the city attorney's office. Shauna Conson-Codd was being charged with filing false reports, property tampering, and fraud for the fake fines and towing authorization. The letter detailed everything: unauthorized use of HOA authority, harassment, false impersonation, and destruction of property for crumpling my survey. The HOA's insurance wouldn't cover her legal defense because she'd acted outside her actual authority. She was personally facing up to 18 months in jail and $15,000 in fines. At the emergency HOA meeting that weekend, which I watched from my pergola with popcorn, Maple Crest Estates voted unanimously to remove her as president, effective immediately. She stood there in front of everyone, no longer wearing a cardigan, looking small and defeated, and whispered, "But I was just trying to maintain standards." Nobody responded. The silence was deafening. She was also banned from holding any HOA office for the next 5 years and ordered to complete a community boundaries seminar that reportedly includes a PowerPoint presentation titled Plats, Not Vibes. Her face crumpled as she realized she'd lawyered herself into the sun over a pergola that was never in her jurisdiction to begin.